That's nice.
We're officially live.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. The time is 5:34 p.m. Welcome everyone to our Vallejo Flood and Wastewater District meeting. We'll go ahead and do our roll call and then we'll do the pledge. If you could conduct a roll call.
President Soares.
Present.
Vice President Bregenzer.
Present.
Trustee Machulak.
Present.
Trustee James.
Present.
Trustee Matias.
Present.
Trustee Trustee Gordon.
Present.
And let it be known for the record that Trustee Lidigue and Palmeris will be arriving later today at the meeting.
All right. That'll bring us to the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone can stand up and join us for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So if I could just...
Yeah, go ahead, General Manager Tom.
Thank you. So I just thank you for having the meeting here. So we'll appreciate any feedback on the meeting. We've set things up. We'll have a different TV in the very back. But whatever we can do to kind of make this work better. I mean, if the delay is a problem, we can try to figure that out. If we need microphones or how we can best do things. One of the things that we don't have right now is the ability for, at least I don't think, is for people to actually call in and comment.
Not for today's meeting, but
Right.
we can arrange it for next meeting.
Right, so we'll have that ready for the next meeting. So, but anything that you have, like anything that works or doesn't work, let us know, and we'll continue to make improvements. We will have new furniture next time and new chairs. So we'll be able to do that.
And just so you know, this meeting is being streamed via our YouTube channel,
Okay.
which is Vallejo FWD.
And how do you want us to alert you if you want to speak?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess we'll just have to, I'll just
Raise our hand.
go in a direction. You know, we'll start on one side and kind of see if everybody wants to go, and we'll iterate. Thank you for bringing that up, that we wouldn't have had a system.
And the other part is that we pick the seating more or less, so if there's something you want to change with the seating, let us know.
I think it's good.
Excuse me, what did you say that site was going to be at?
It is YouTube at Vallejo FWD.
Thank you.
It's also on there. It's on the agenda.
Okay.
Also the agenda or the video?
The video to
Yes,
stream the video
yes,
on the
yes.
agenda.
Wonderful.
Oh, it's also, yeah, it's in the back of the agenda as well, so people can see.
Perfect. All right, so that's going to bring us to our third item, which is our approval of agenda and our consent calendar. And we can go ahead and start with the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff or any questions about the agenda from the board? All right, seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
And do we need a second in the?
You know?
No, not. All right, let's go ahead and vote. All those, we can do all in favor, we can just do a voice vote.
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Motion passes.
passes unanimously. That's gonna bring us to our consent calendar. Did we receive any public comment, or do we have anyone here that wishes to comment on anything on the consent calendar or pull any items?
We did not receive any online public comment. I'm not sure if any members of the public want to speak on. We do not.
All right, seeing none, do any members of our board have questions or want to remove any items from consent?
So I did, but I came in and gave me some great details and information, so it's okay.
All right, so I'm scanning, and I think we seem okay. I think we're ready for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Wonderful, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Motion carries.
Carries unanimously. All right, that is going to bring us to item number 4, which is a public hearing. And I will ask General Manager Tomko to introduce this item.
Perfect, thank you. So this is kind of a carry-on from the last meeting. This has to do with a public hearing to adopt the revised upper lateral ordinance. And so that's going to include a point-of-sale lateral inspection requirement. And this is superseding ordinance 2024-41. Stephanie Holliday, our management analyst, is going to provide a presentation. And she has, based on the comments that you provided last time, she's talked to the Solano Realtor Association, really got their comments, try to work together jointly to figure out what works best. Done a lot of legwork on this, and so hopefully in this presentation, she'll provide information to answer a lot of those questions, any additional questions that you have. So there will be a presentation. Hopefully you guys can kind of see it through there or turn around and we'll keep working on that. Stephanie.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
ahead and let's see if I'm able to switch slides or not. Nope.
1 second. There you go.
All right.
There you go. Oh, I was going to do that. My apologies. There you go.
We'll keep going through here. We've already done all of that. All right, so,
You have a delay on the TV, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Let me put it from the beginning. So just wait a few seconds and there's a delay. 6, 7 seconds.
that's the wrong presentation slide.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Let
So
me
I'm just
pull
gonna
up
go
the-
off of my slides while he maybe finds the updated version. So as the board's aware, the plant is heavily regulated. Under the Clean Water Act, an NPDES permit is required for discharge into U.S. waters. So, and you are also aware of I&I, or inflow and infiltration, which is when other sources of water come into the sewer system through cracks and breaks in pipes. This increases the volume of flow into the wastewater treatment plant, which can increase costs and other issues. So one of the special provisions of the NPDES permit requires the district to develop and present to you a sewer lateral inspection ordinance that's appropriate for our service area for consideration by the board before April of 2025. So we're on a deadline. So based on the research and the outreach that we conducted, we're presenting to the board that it would be most appropriate to amend the district's current upper lateral ordinance 2471 to include the point of sale upper lateral inspection requirements within it, rather than creating a separate ordinance. So this addition,
Did you say 2471?
2471.
Because this says 2441.
2471 is it?
The revised,
Oh.
Oh, is there a typo on it?
This one says 2024-41, as we said, it's 71.
We'll verify. It was adopted in September of 2024 as our most recent ordinance
Thank you.
to include the upper lateral inspection requirement.
What should be the correct?
We're gonna verify.
But what did you say at first?
2471.
All right, thank you.
So this addition would require that prior to the close of escrow or sale or transfer of real property served by the district, a licensed plumber would inspect the upper lateral, and a report would be prepared and provided to both the buyer and the district 10 days prior to the close of escrow. So that's the limited scope of the additions. So if adopted, some potential benefits would include reduced I&I, reduced treatment costs by decreasing the amount of flow to the wastewater treatment plant. Inspections would increase the ability to detect and address issues through early proactive maintenance, which would also allow residents to potentially avoid expensive emergency repairs. So some common causes of sewer problems can be identified through these inspections, such as debris, treat roots, and pipe offsets. The point of sale inspections would also increase transparency and foster informed decisions to allow buyers to avoid repair costs after the purchase of a property. So kind of align them at a more advantageous time. So in developing the inspection requirements, we remain sensitive to the challenges that the ordinance may present to present and future residents of the city of Vallejo. Last month, we presented to you our research on other adopted ordinances, as well as discussed feedback and concerns that we have received from our outreach. After receiving your comments, I went back and updated my research, pulled all of the assessor recorder's transactions for the last 2 years to review the impact, and also continued collaborating with our Solano Association of Realtors. A few of the members are here to speak on those interactions to improve the language of this ordinance. So one challenge was the cost for inspection and potential repairs. I have a chart on the slide. It looks great. But based on information that I was able to obtain, inspection costs for residential inspection would be around $300. The commercial would be somewhere around $500. However, it is important to note with both of these, that inspection cost varies depending on the length and the construction of those laterals. So even if a home has a longer lateral, that inspection would increase or decrease depending on that construction and the length. The other thing in regards to note is that 97% of real estate transactions in the city of Vallejo are residential. So 2% are commercial and industrial, and the other 1% is split between vacant industrial lots and mixed commercial use. So we pulled all of those transactions to review. In our discussions about the challenge of cost, we received some valuable feedback from our peers at Solano Association of Realtors that was incorporated into the language of this amendment to ensure that inspections could be completed by either party, allowing parties to negotiate regarding the costs, providing flexibility for various transactions and financial situations. So we also worked with the Solano Association of Realtors to align the language of the ordinance with our intent to focus on good disclosures of information. From the feedback received, mitigating the impacts on transactions meant allowing parties to continue to negotiate all the terms of the sales and not requiring specific repairs or timelines. Sellers are already required to disclose issues. So anything that would cause great concern resulting from these inspections, they should have had some signs or symptoms that they would be aware of. The timing of the point of sale inspection and identification of any needed repairs may also allow for those costs to be handled more economically, included in the time of sale. So being able to negotiate those costs instead of after the closing, you've spent all of your money on your down payment, also incurring a large repair bill. So additionally, communicating with realtors within and outside of Solano County will be important to ensure new requirements are relayed appropriately to ensure that people can comply with them. So developing resources on the district's website and providing education will be a necessary part of implementing the inspection requirements. Collaborating with the Solano Association of Realtors will be a valuable first step. I've already scheduled our first meeting in April with them to discuss potential policies and procedures that we would follow. We would be creating materials and resources regarding lateral inspections, compliance, and providing ongoing feedback to improve the program. Lastly, as district resources are limited, consideration was made for what level of support would be reasonable and sustainable, and provide the necessary staffing to implement the program, collect and evaluate the data, and conduct ongoing assessments of the program's efficacy. The current proposal, we believe, would allow the program to have tasks consistently completed and not delay any of the real estate transactions that the city has. So if adopted tonight, the next steps of this process would be for the district staff to develop procedures and communication tools and perform additional outreach prior to implementing the ordinance in July of 2025, July 1st. After implementation, we would then begin conducting evaluation of data collected through the inspection reports and determine if there are any changes that are necessary, evaluate other efforts that we could have. So, tonight, I wish you could see my beautiful slide.
The last one's up on the back.
Okay, so the last one's up there?
We've got them up
Okay.
back, yeah.
All right, so our recommended actions would be to open a public hearing and receive comments. And then if you have the next steps behind you, that might be the most,
Go one more.
the most helpful.
One more.
It's
Okay, you catching up?
So the recommended action is so we open the public hearing,
Yes.
Receive comments, and close the public hearing, get the board questions, any deliberation, and then you can vote to adopt it.
Well, with that, are we waiting for this, or can we go ahead and open the public hearing?
you can open the
All right, let's go ahead and we'll open the public hearing. And have we had any members of the public express interest in speaking? Are we calling them on from the audience?
So we have none online, and I believe for something today, which is support.
Just a comment at this time.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go the two here. If you could introduce, you can stay seated, I think, because we have the owl. But if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll, we usually do about 3 minutes. We'll just sort of keep an eye.
Perfect.
Thank you for being our first.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. I'm Shelley Tappan. I'm a real estate broker here in town with the company Real Estate. And I'm just bringing comment on behalf of the Solano Association of Realtors. We just wanted to thank the district staff for including us and collaborating in partnership early on, taking our feedback and allowing us to do what's best for the district as well as us that are out in the field serving the customers, the same customers that you serve every day. So we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Deanna Lang, I'm a local realtor. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Board of Realtors, but I do a lot of business in town and I do a lot of old homes. We have unique stock here. So I'm glad we're putting something like this in place. Most every other community has done so already as a point of sale. I do have a couple questions that didn't seem to be answered anywhere, so maybe you could help me. Is there an age of property, as in properties built before X date, that are exempt from this? Because we have we've improved things in the last 100 years. So that's a question. Mechanism of notification, just so you know, because this really should be part of the inspection contingency for a purchase of a property, that window is generally 17 days, sometimes shorter. Now, it's incumbent on the seller or the buyer to get their stuff together, but what is the notification timeline from the district? Because of course they're going to want to know that's okay, or what problems there may be coming down the pike. Because it really is a condition. If somebody wants to buy a house and they find they've got a $30,000 obligation and they'll get $1,500 taken care of, that's a big deal. And then, so how long will it take to get a reply and via notification just to the agents or individuals? And then my concern is, we have some properties, that were built 100 years ago that are ganged, 2 and 3 properties on one line, one upper lateral line. So that is an implication to the surrounding houses as well. So house A can sell, but now there's a notification for these other 2 that they have to also do this. And if I'm not correct, I think it's much more expensive than just replacing a line to the main line. You're creating an individual line all the way to where that is. That can be 150 feet away. And if you're charging by length, then that's expensive. So these are my considerations. I didn't see anything in the notes, so you might want to put that in the hopper, see what comes up.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. Anyone else wish to speak on the item? So seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and now we can get questions from the board. I'd love to get responses from the questions that Ms. Lang raised because I think those are great, all great points. And then we'll open it up to the board.
Yeah, certainly, Stephanie.
Okay. So the age of the property, so within the text of the ordinance, we do mention that we will be creating policy and procedures that will be based on some of these things will be included in those, including potential age exemptions. So exemptions as a whole, whether or not it's a recent transaction. So we don't want to require people to do this every 6 months if it's a property that's turning over quickly. So we'll be considering what is reasonable in conjunction with the real estate community as well as our experience. So with regard to age of property, that would be potentially one of the exemptions to limit the time period. Anything built after this date would be exempted. The mechanism of notification, I think, would be in a situation where our notification would be required for the sale to proceed. This is specifically written so that it is exclusively an exchange of information and there is no requirement for the district to acknowledge or reply to that. It's just simply that you need to provide us a copy of it so that we can review it and evaluate it for various matters, I guess. So whether it's just data collection or identifying areas that we need to perform more outreach or education. In the instance, if there is one, and we can work on this again in policy and procedures, if we need to acknowledge receipt for some sort of clearing of that, we're welcome to do that. That's something that we're very easily able to accommodate. And our time period was 10 days for supplying that, so I think that's within that 17-day period that she mentioned. The other concern that she did mention with the 2 or 3 properties is something that we are aware of. It is something that's pretty, I wouldn't call it common, but it's definitely been seen in the city of Vallejo where laterals are connected. It's something that we do address on a case-by-case basis, but because we're not requiring repairs in this instance, it's again something that those property owners could ask the plumber that's doing the inspection, what's a quote for repair, and then they can negotiate that. Our intention again is not to require or force any property or adjacent properties to make any of these repairs, but just simply wanting people to be aware. Because as we all know, if you own your home, you own that liability or you own that, that problem. And so we just want to make sure that they're aware of that. And that's really the intention of this. It's just that information sharing, but letting the private matter remain private.
Thank you for that. And so you mentioned having some type of exemption for more recently built homes. Is that something we would add? We'd clarify and add to this?
So
in a subsequent
the intention was to create policy and procedures, much like we do with the upper lateral program, where you authorize us to enforce something and we create things that are, because it can change. Just like what used to be an engineering standard 15 years ago may not be an engineering standard now. It allows us to provide some technical information. We're happy to bring that back as an item for you guys to review if that's something that you feel more comfortable with. But oftentimes those things are just internal procedures of when we need to have those, and those would be relayed and available on our website. And that's part of what we wanted to start in April with the Solano Association of Realtors.
Okay, so if we adopted this here, there would be then a subsequent process to determine the exact procedures which could be done.
Correct.
And it could come back to us even just as an update.
Correct.
Wouldn't have to be a full, but okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, the idea is it won't actually start till July 1st.
Yes.
Okay.
But we wanted to, it has to be adopted, or has to be brought to the board today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then July 1st it would go into effect.
yeah. Questions from the board?
So it's still a voluntary system when it is adopted July 1st.
So it is a mandatory inspection, a voluntary repair.
Okay.
Yes, so the only thing that would be required here is that if you are selling a property, you and the potential buyer would need to negotiate who's going to conduct an inspection of the upper lateral, and then a copy of that report has to be given to the buyer if they're not doing the inspection themselves, and a copy to the district. Everything else remains the same.
Go ahead, we'll just come down the point.
You had mentioned that the buyer and the district get a copy of the report. Does the seller get a copy of the report as well?
So the assumption is that because you're talking about it, they could. We didn't want to mandate it because it's really, if you're purchasing the home, you're the one inheriting it. If you're going to negotiate over it, we're happy if you feel it needs to be shared between both. But I guess it was the assumption that if you're going to begin negotiating, you would kind of say, hey, this is what the plumber said. But we're happy to update that language.
Well, I'm just thinking that it would help if, you go through the process of trying to buy a house, and you decide you don't want to buy it, and you've already paid for the inspection. Are you going to make another buyer pay for another inspection of the same line, or would the seller then have the duty to disclose that to the next potential buyer? Would that make sense?
So we do have in the ordinance language that an inspection is good for 6 months. So in that instance, provided that a second buyer comes along in 6 months, that inspection would still be good. If we don't feel like that's a sufficient period of time, we can always look at extending that further. But that was kind of the thought, is that if for some reason a sale falls through, you still paid for that inspection, you still have it, and you can disclose it to a new party in the future.
So the seller would get a copy with them to be able to disclose it? I mean, because otherwise it's just kept with the buyer who walked away, and then the seller doesn't know whether there's an issue or not. And
we can include the language to say the seller, buyer, and district need to all obtain a copy.
I think
That's a fairly
sense.
easy minor adjustment to language.
And then it wouldn't add any additional costs, it would just make it a copy,
just have a
right? Yeah.
copy. I think that makes sense.
And kind of to Trustee Brigander's point, and I'm looking at this from a used car standpoint of, so if, in other words, who's keeping the data and the information of the age of that upper lateral for each respective property?
So we currently, through our GIS system at least, maintain some level of record of the approximate age of laterals. But are we talking about in regards?
In other words, if there was a repair done to it,
Uh-huh.
who has that information? Is that new buyer gonna be aware of that, of when that was, versus an old,
Gotcha.
100-year-old house
Yeah.
that it hasn't been done for 100 years?
Yeah, so we already get calls like this almost every day, asking, hey, do you know if this repair has been done? Can you tell me when the permit was pulled? So we do maintain any record if that activity was done legally with a permit. We can provide that information. If it wasn't done through the appropriate channels, we wouldn't have the information available regardless. Our intention with this inspection ordinance is to be able to add the information that comes from these inspection reports to our information available on laterals. And so in this instance, if you're looking at age, if they have an inspection and they're questioning what the age of the lateral is, they can contact the district and we're happy to look at that information. We're happy to, relay it, and we do that already. We do get calls from people asking about repairs on the property that they've purchased.
And is the district the only holder of that information? In other words, does the county have access to that information if at any point they need it?
The county doesn't.
No.
So the county, okay, just,
Yeah.
and so.
In some regards, the city may,
The city
depending on
may,
if an excavation
based on
permit
the
was
permit
required
that was applied for it?
For most upper lateral permits, they're, for the grand majority, they're with inside, because the district cleanout's right at the property line, so it's on private property, so they don't go through the city. So the permit's actually all with us. It's only if you're working the lower lateral that you actually get into the street or the public right of way, then that does actually go to a city excavation permit. But the vast majority, if they're from the district cleanout, the upper lateral portion that's private, that's just through us.
So to be clear, the upper lateral permit is through VFWD, where the lower lateral is tied to the city, because it's tied to the branch of the
For this inspection, it's just for the
for
upper
this.
lateral.
Okay, and so for a potential buyer, when would, I guess the question is, when would they first see if there were any issues with the lateral? In other words, is that gonna be, in other words, I'm trying to avoid them seeing it just at the closing papers. When would they have the opportunity to ask if, in other words, is there a summary sheet when they first go and look at a property is that something, is that a thing that they can add for this specific one? Because if you're costing them per foot, I'm assuming each property may have a different upper lateral cost. So that should, so what I'm asking is, when is that first disclosed to a potential buyer?
Sure. So depending on who conducts the inspection, obviously you have the right to be on site when inspections are done on a property that you're purchasing. So you can choose to be there when they're undergoing that. It's typical, from what I understand, I reached out to Fox to kind of explain CCTV to me a little bit. And they have, the availability of technology right there, so they could probably tell the person on site. But within the requirements, they are supposed to have this disclosed to them 10 days prior to the close of escrow to allow them some level of time if they need to make any changes. So kind of two times that they would for sure be able to be notified, either the day of the inspection or 10 days prior to close of escrow.
Yeah, typically if you're buying a house, you may have the home inspection, roof inspection. There's all different kinds of inspections. So this is just another inspection added to it. So as you're going through all your inspections, hey, I want all these, you need to do this upper lateral inspection. So that's one of the inspections. Like, you may be there, you may not, or the plumber may say, hey, I looked at it and here's the results.
So can you explain to the general public what an inspection of an upper lateral looks like? Are they digging the ground out?
Good question. So an upper lateral, so typically for the perfect upper lateral, it has a clean out that's by the house. So you have a little standpipe that's coming up. They put a camera down in it, they run it all the way through, and then you get to the clean out, another clean out, which is usually the district clean out on the property line. And then you can view that whole thing. Sometimes if they don't have a district clean out, it would go all the way to the main. But they can just run the camera all the way in, they can take a look at it and then pull it back out. And they're looking at a little screen.
So it's strictly an internal pipe view versus what's around the pipe. If there's any root issues or any foundation issues, they would never know.
Correct. You're really looking at, the majority of the pipes out there are vitrified clay pipe. So that terracotta type material. Oftentimes what happens is that, especially if you're not watering your lawn or whatever, or there's trees growing and it's drought, they'll start growing into the pipe. And so all the roots will start getting into there. Also, if there's some settlement, the pipe will start to break. BCP is known to break. So we'll get some breakage in there, they get all these roots in there. And so they'll come in and say, oh, well, this just needs to be cleaned out. Or if there's breaks in the pipe, it needs to be replaced. That's the vast majority of them.
Okay.
And they're usually pretty clear.
Okay. And so I'm interested to follow up with the mayor's question of the new homes, of what is this exemption? Because once again, I think this council has proven to be a forward-thinking type of council to where for future development, what are developers supposed to be looking for to something like this when this comes up in their development agreement?
So, if we're talking about existing laterals on property or versus.
Well, and the question, and I apologize, I brought up this question last time, is if we're talking about a mixed use versus straight residential, if it's a mixed use, downtown Vallejo,
Yes.
putting up a brand new lower retail and then upper 4 stories of residential up there. Obviously, that's gonna be a different beast versus a residential. So what does that look for? In other words, I want the developers to understand what they're looking for to when they're dealing with VFW for something like this.
So as she talks about, there's the vast majority of residential is what this is going to apply to, is mainly residential. But in new development, it goes through the development process. So it goes through an entitlement process where we're looking at everything. And in that, we'll have them inspect the lines, take a look at everything. And those will be kind of a separate conditional permit to say, okay, well, you need to look at this, we need this fixed, or we need that fixed. Because anytime you're doing a brand new something, then we look at it all, and then we have standards on the type of materials to use. It sounded like part of your question though, if it's kind of existing or a new house or something, usually they probably use PVC or HDPE, which certainly lasts a lot longer. And I think that's as we develop this and we move through, starting to look at those, it's like, well, PVC and HDPE, those newer sections, probably go a lot longer. If they're newer, maybe 10 years before we have to do an inspection. And then we'll say, okay, those are all okay, we're not gonna have to do an inspection. But a lot of that information is gonna come over time. Like I said, vitrified plate pipe, if they put in that, it breaks all the time. I mean, it's a material that if there's movement in the soil or trees, you can have problems with it.
And that's where I'm really interested, where is this threshold for where is your exemption date of how this applies?
Right. So definitely, I mean, right now it's going to apply to everybody. Anybody that sells a house, you're going to have to do the inspection. And then over time, we'll have to start to look at it and say, okay, well, what we've seen from the inspections is that, the ones that are built recently, those don't need to be inspected. And we can put some of that in the procedures of how to best look at it. We'll also be looking at, other standards, how other, municipalities are doing that as well. So it could be that, if it's been built in the last 10 years and it's PVC or HDPE, need an inspection. And we'll get through some of those procedures.
And what's going to be clear, any licensed plumber can do the inspection. Does it have to come from an approved vendor list, or is that just any licensed plumber? Thank you for that clarification. That's all my questions.
They continue to cycle and then come back. I see Trustee Matias and.
Thank you so much for this. I appreciate the presentation. I got a chance to have a one-on-one breakdown, so I appreciate your time and your effort. I do have a question, well, a couple of them. Why 6 months, and could it be longer?
So 6 months.
For the permit, for the inspection.
For how long the inspection lasts. So we wanted a time period that could allow for some leverage without extreme amounts of situations happening. So for instance, let's say that you inspect your house and then 3 months later we have an earthquake, right? We're all gonna be a little concerned about the inspection from 3 months ago and what happened. So 6 months was the time period that we felt would provide enough flexibility for people without the likelihood of lots of things happening in the period of time. There is a possibility if the board is more comfortable to extend that, but we wanna try and keep it conservative to make sure that the inspections are really providing what they're intended to do, which is accurate information of the existence of that lateral.
Thank you. And I noticed something about mobile homes, that right now currently there's no requirement, they're exempt. But it says except if the private sewer line main is sanitary sewage easement. What is that? What is it? Why is there a clause there?
So mobile homes are typically constructed for this newbie explanation, maybe that's good, maybe it's bad. They're constructed differently, and so they're treated differently throughout our codes just because of that. So sometimes there are common laterals in those mobile home parks, and sometimes there are multiple individual laterals, just like regular residential.
Yeah, the vast majority of mobile homes are part of a mobile home park. They don't own the parcel. So everything inside the mobile home park is usually private. So all the sewers inside are typically private, and then there'll only be the last lateral going out. So in a sell mobile home, this really don't apply.
I asked that because there was, a while back, there was a meeting and the person is stuck to that land for X amount of years, whether they want to be or not, unfortunately. And they said that they were responsible for that space, but doesn't mean they're responsible for the sewage, right? Are you saying? Okay. And then my last question was, the reimbursement of expenses. Can you explain that a little more for the audience? I'm reading it.
Are you talking about the upper lateral reimbursement program?
Yes, it says right here, reimbursement of owner, upper lateral repairs or replacement, yes.
Yes, so that the upper lateral replacement program is something we spent a little bit of time talking about, but that's a program that the district has that allows residents to apply for up to $3,500 towards the cost of the replacement of the upper lateral. So in these instances, if somebody found their lateral needed to be replaced, buyer or seller, they potentially would be eligible to have that $3,500 offset the cost. And so if a negotiation resulted in the seller needing to repair it, they could apply, credit that towards the cost. If the buyer had it, it would be available once it became the owner of the home.
Okay. You said offset, so you said 30,000?
It's designed to target about 60% of the cost, and so that's, it does what it's intended to do, which is incentivize people to update their infrastructure. It's a pretty popular program.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So just to comment again on the time frame, and you made a comment around natural disaster. So an earthquake. Outside of a natural disaster, from a time perspective of this lateral, what else in that 6 months, when you look at that 6 months period, what does it really mean?
What does the 6 months mean?
So you're saying that's a conservative time frame?
Yes.
And you're saying, as an example, this was your example, that, if we have an earthquake, then we would be concerned. So that's a natural disaster. And so what else would you be concerned about in that 6 month time frame? Sure. Because these are they're laterals. And so what's interesting to me is the 6 months. Then I think about the age of a home. If a home is 100 years old and a permit has never been pulled, those kinds of things. And how do you really factor in when you talk about the different properties that are here and the age and that consideration of 6 months period?
So the 6 months is the timing that once you perform an inspection, the inspection doesn't have to be repeated.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I understand.
Okay.
But what I really want to understand is, how did you formulate 6 months? You talked about a natural disaster, and you used that as your example, like, if we have a natural disaster, if we have an earthquake, and you had an inspection 3 months before that, earthquake, this is a conservative thought process. But outside of a natural disaster, what other considerations are you making in designing a time frame?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I can answer that real quick. So, you're right, it's a little bit variable. Justin, if you want to talk, Justin is our director of field operations, but how quickly, if you want to talk about how quickly roots can grow in pipelines, we clean pipelines, we have them on regular schedules to clean, and there's some areas that the pipelines, the roots just grow like crazy. So certainly roots could be one that would grow. Anything else that you can think of, Justin?
No, root intrusion would probably be the primary one. And if you had, if you're the plumber, did a CCTV inspection on the lateral and found, root growth inside a joint, inside the pipeline, it could be a concern within that 6-month period of time that it would need to be addressed.
Okay, and so that's what I wanted to understand. What are the variables that really that are driving you to what you consider conservative? And then the other question behind that is when that CTV, when that scan is done, and for example, there was no root intrusion, so forth and on, and here we come at the 7th month. You know, it just, to me, I really need another, when the next buyer comes along, do I really need another inspection when that inspection was really clean and we're like 1 or 2 months out? I just think about those kinds of things when I'm a homeowner.
Yeah.
And I think about those kinds of things when we put policy in place and policy becomes really rigid at times from a government perspective. And on this end of the spectrum, you're looking at it's clean and I'm 6 months, I'm 1 day past that 6 months and now I've got to go pay another $500 for a day later. So it's just thinking about how does that really sound and look when we're making these decisions about timeframes.
I mean, I think overall, I mean, as you know, talked about that, it could be certainly longer. I mean, I think a year would work out as well. It's more of a, you know, it's a selection that we picked. But yeah, whatever works best. But this would be the case that, you know, somehow the buyer and the seller didn't come to some resolution and then it went out and then somehow another buyer was found like in that same time period and there was after the 6 months. So, you know, whether it was pulled off the market or something, I mean, you know, it just depends on the action. I don't think it happens as often, but I think going to a year, I don't think is that. And part of it, as we look at these, as we start to get them, then we can look at the data and say, okay, we may come back and say, oh, you know, we found there's a problem here, but I'm okay pushing it to a year.
Because that was my next question. It's, you know, when you talked about, you're going to be gathering data from this work to better inform where you're going next because we don't really have that data. And so that concerns me that we really don't have the data. We know that it's a good thing to do. We know the reasons why it's a good thing to do, but we don't have enough data from my perspective and what you said to really say 6 months, 3 months, or whatever that time period is. And so from my perspective, 9 to 12 months sounds much better until I can see what is the data from 100 inspections, 200 inspections, whatever it is, because you're leaning on the public, their dollars to inform what should that policy really look like.
Right, and I think a year is fine. I mean, the whole point of the program is to prevent I&I. It's mandated by the regional board, so we're trying to satisfy the needs that they have and then also protect the buyer and the seller. So as they go into it, if there's something wrong, that they're protected. But adding it a year I think that's a problem.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go Trustee Matias.
Thank you, President. So can you quickly summarize what impact, if any, this has on commercial buildings?
On commercial buildings? So it would apply to commercial buildings as well as residential. So they would still need to get an inspection prior to the close of escrow. And it would, again, remain a negotiation between buyer and seller who is going to conduct the inspection and any repairs that they want to negotiate as part of the.
Is there a cost differential between commercial and residential? Do you have some ballpark?
Yes, so based on the numbers that I was able to pull, it's about $200 more for a commercial inspection, so about $500 initially. That does increase based on the length of the lateral, which I did want to mention because some of these commercial properties are a larger, longer lateral. And so it really depends just because as Mr. Tomko mentioned that the CCTV is going by the length. So the longer it takes to perform the inspection, the higher the cost.
And do we have any sense of how many of those in this point in time, like how many commercial building owners would be impacted by something like that?
So based on the numbers that I pulled from the Solano Assessor Recorder's Office, in the last 2 years, we've had 22, the total of 680 commercial building transactions in the last 2 years. Of those, about half would not potentially be part of this because they were either between banking institutions, marriage, trusts, transfers, things like that. So you're looking at potentially 150 properties a year at most. And a large portion of those would be retail, commercial businesses.
And the big difference is that, I mean, so where this would apply, if it's a commercial property that's just selling to another owner, they're not doing anything. There's no TI, no tenant improvement or anything. As soon as they do a tenant improvement, it rolls into the entitlement process, and then we would require an inspection anyway. So this would be applying that, hey, I'm selling this commercial property, I have a buyer, and they're doing the same thing, maybe just offices, and hey, you're gonna have to look at you're gonna have to video the sewer.
The reason why I'm asking those questions is just to follow on the thread from Trustee Matulak, and I am thinking about the future, and so is this group. And I suspect there's probably going to be many more commercial transactions over the next 5 to 10 years. And so, to what extent are we, from a development standpoint, making something like this as seamless as possible and/or attractive? On the flip side, someone who's coming in with significant capital to invest, is there an opportunity to raise more revenue? And so, just love for you guys to think about that as you have the data flowing in and report back to the group on it.
Thank you.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this was, when we had this conversation last time, it was more or less around equity and our working class or economically low income home buyers. So when we're talking about exceptions, wanting to make sure, and I know there will be a subsequent process to this where we will have a chance to have input in the policies and procedures. But I just wanted to raise that up because we do have older neighborhoods where we have seniors or elders in the home, or we have subdivisions that were redlined in this city. So just wanting us to be mindful that some of those sellers and buyers won't have necessarily the money to either do the inspection or even to get the repair. So if we're including the exceptions with that, and then also just to go to the commercial property conversation, there's a lot of development specifically targeted in North Vallejo that will be coming up, and that's next to residential homes. And again, that's an economically low income part of the city. So if there is a possibility of making that exception for our larger corporations or investors, so that way they can be a good partner when you are coming into the city. I just wanted to make that comment. But again, I look forward to looking at the policies and procedures and working with you.
Yeah, and the thought is that this really protects low income everybody, because this is an opportunity that, hey, there may be something wrong with the line.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, I mean, this is actually kind of almost an insurance, because you're not gonna, if you buy a property and you not spend your last dollar on it, then you find out the sewer's bad and you're like, oh no, at least there's the upper lateral program, but then you have to spend some extra money. So
yes.
The idea is that this should actually help everybody.
All right, we've done a circle. Anything? All right, Trustee Matula, we'll just keep going in a circle.
So to follow up, so we've transitioned from residential to talking about a little bit of commercial. So now I want to focus on Mare Island. So does industrial fall into the same category as commercial?
So different in Mare Island. So Mare Island has no property lines. Mare Island's owned by the vast majority. I mean, aside from the properties, the houses that are there. So if there's an exchange of the houses that are there that were built recently in Tisdale, that area, so then this would apply. But any of the industrial properties, that whole land is owned by Mare Island Company. So there's no property line, there's no upper laterals, there's no district sewer, debatable, but it's all one property. So typically where this applies is there's a distinction between this is private property and this is public property. So in the industrial areas of Mare Island, this would not.
So, because the reason I'm asking that is because they're in the process of putting together the specific plan for Mare Island. So if there's any changes or tweaks, how does all of this apply for, once again, future development, and once again, industrial versus commercial, if that's going to play, because I'm thinking, looking at this from a planning perspective, because obviously from the zoning maps to specific plans, those are labeled certain ways. So is there a distinction or a separation between potentially more, and maybe not industrial is the correct word, but a higher level of commercial that's going to have need a different type of upper lateral.
Yeah, so like Savage and Coke, I mean, it's been renamed, so that actually is a private parcel, but it goes to sewer, that's kind of weird, but say that all became private parcels, and then it became a public right of way, and then there was a distinction that this is a private lateral, and this is the public system, then it would require an inspection, but that won't happen until that whole island, there's public right of way, there's private properties and that's set up. So as far as right now, it wouldn't apply at all. But looking into the future, like anytime you're doing entitlement, it's separate from this process because it's an entitlement. And so you're looking at all the development, looking at the sewer lines and everything, and this is what would be required as far as inspecting the sewers, making everything whole before you move forward.
I guess my underlying question is from an infrastructure standpoint on Mare Island, what is the potential impact of where we're at now for future developers that are looking at that place right now? Because we've heard everything from a casino to this, that, and everything else. What are for those forward-thinking developers? How are they supposed to be forward-thinking when it comes to this infrastructure that may or may not be there?
Great question. I mean, that's a huge question overall. I think for the point of sale, I mean, it wouldn't apply to the industrial properties as part of Mare Island. But as far as the infrastructure in total, I mean, that's a bigger conversation overall of everything that would apply, and a lot of that is still in flux.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
So I asked them that same question because I was worried about that as it's building up, and hopefully likewise for South Vallejo, which I'm very fortunate to have this in my district. I want to know, as they were referring to the developers, would there be a consideration of any type of incentives or bonuses to developers who are trying to do the right thing? And my next thing, go back to the question for this, why the 6 months? I do understand. I wanted to ask the realtors, do you see a challenge of it being from 6 months to 12 months? Could you share?
I think a couple of things. One, right now our market, things are staying on the market a little bit longer. So if you had a seller who wanted to do pre-sale inspections, meaning they're getting things inspected before they have a buyer and including those in their disclosure package, you could essentially be almost at the end of your 6 months before they even get a buyer.
Well said.
I think the same thing.
So you think 6 months is good or longer?
I think 1 year would be a little bit more favorable.
Okay.
And I believe that in some of the ordinances over the bridge that are a little bit stricter, I think, and I don't quote me because I'm not 100% sure, but I believe those are closer to the certificate being good for a year.
Thank you, because I did write that here. 12 months would seem to be more reasonable. And the other question I have: what if you sold the house? This is for you all, and you've been in a place. Why would it not be a requirement to do the same procedure if that's what you're worried about, roots and whatnot? Why one owns it? Do you send out notices to homeowners or landowners, whether it's commercial, and whatever the case may be? Do you send them, say, hey, we might want to check your pipes or anything like that? Do you do anything like that?
So,
do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? It sounded great in my head.
I understand your question. So, I mean, certainly in the point of sale, it's always, this is going to require it to the point of sale, but it sounds like do we send anything? We do advertise the upper lateral program to let people know. Usually what happens is that all of a sudden you're cooking your Thanksgiving dinner, and next thing you know, all your toilets start backing, and you're like, oh no, this is horrible. You call the plumber, and then it's like, then you can get in the upper lateral program and get it fixed. Like, it's usually because of some situation that you're like, oh, there's something wrong with my sewer. Or it's been known that it keeps backing up and you have a plumber. So there's some residents that they have a plumber come out probably every year and just clear the line because they're getting a lot of roots in it.
Yeah.
And then at some point they'll come in and say, hey, I'm just going to get it fixed, and I'll burst it and I'll have a brand new pipe there.
Appreciate it.
But we do use the upper lateral program. We try to encourage people to use it as much as possible.
Thank you. I know it's not related to this right here, but I just wanted to ask since it was brought up.
All right, I skipped over the vice president when I came through.
That's
So go ahead.
I have a question, not to belabor the 6 months or 1 year, but can you talk to me about how it would work with a flipper buying the house and getting the report and then turning around and selling the house in 6 months? Are they required to have the new purchaser go through and do another inspection, or are they required to give that inspection so they're not just passing on that headache without disclaiming it? and maybe a realtor can answer that for me.
Should definitely be a disclosure.
So will be mandated that would be a disclosure to the new buyer that there was an inspection that's 7 months old and it had problems?
Well, our current requirements are that a seller has to disclose any known material defects, regardless of the age. It could have been, it seems a little bit silly, but it could have been 15 years ago. If they still have that inspection, there is no time period and they're supposed
Okay,
to
good.
provide that.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question, thank you.
All right. We just have trustees Leonard and Mattias that you haven't had your second. Anything else? I know trustee Pomar is late. Any questions or?
How's everyone feeling about this? I guess that's kind of like.
I'm ready for it.
I've got my eye on the clock for us. I think we might be ready for a motion. So
I just had one last, has there ever, and now we're talking about from a 6 month to 12 month, has there ever been any thought about 18 months? Because I'm looking at a full annual weather cycle and the fact that things seem to be changing on a regular basis. Does 18 months, is that out of the realm or is that?
So that's
unusual?
beyond any of the other
Okay.
ordinances that we looked at. It was between 6 and 12 months, and so.
it feels like we're ready, and it feels like we might have. I mean, I was seeing some nods on the 12 months. I think we seemed comfortable with that.
Yeah, the two.
And I appreciated the realtor feedback. The environment allows us for a little more back and forth, which was actually really nice in that case.
And adding the seller to the disclosure.
And adding the
as well.
seller to disclosures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just from a technical standpoint, did we verify if it was 41 or 71?
It is 71.
It is 71?
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, very slight typo. All right. Do we have a motion?
Sure, I don't know how technical I have to be. Do we have to, that we move, that we have conducted a public hearing? Does that need to be part of it?
So there's no need for you to move anything with a special hearing because the chair has already opened and closed our public hearing. So at this time,
So
it would be
just-
appropriate for you to make the motion with the amendment to extend it from a 6-month to a 12-month period.
Okay, so I move that we adopt the revised upper lateral ordinance 2025 XX to include the point of sale lateral inspection requirement superseding the ordinance 2024-71 with the two amendments, the 6 months being 1 year, and adding the seller to the report disclosure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Wonderful.
Perfect, thank you,
Passes
Stephanie.
unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, that's gonna bring us to item 5, which is our administrative items, and we have five. Yeah. Our administrative item, we've got by 4/5 vote, very bizarre.
6 as well.
Well, how about that? We've got a slight discrepancy in the item number. We are on the administrative items,
6.
and we've got
It is
one
6?
item.
It is 6.
It is 6. I'm off. No. Oh, was the consent calendar 4?
No, wait, the administrative item, at least on mine, says 5.
So
Yeah.
mine says 6.
It should be 6.
whatever.
It's because I created a scripted agenda for
Consent calendar is separate.
year.
Doesn't matter. All right.
Precedent.
Item either 5 or 6. It's the
Sounds good.
administrative item.
items, there you go.
And I'll ask the general manager
Sure,
to introduce
so
this item, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to introduce Natalie Meridian, our associate engineer. This is the Sears Point that we are continuing the emergency that we had with the encampment. So just to provide a quick update on where we are.
Board of Trustees, my name is Natalie, and like Mark said, I'm an associate engineer here with the district, and I am managing the Sears Point Force Main Repair Project. So this item 6A is a request to continue an existing emergency action to repair the Sears Point Force Main that was damaged in that fire that was in past October. So I just wanted to provide a schedule update on where we are with the project. The contractor performed some utility investigations and started procuring material in early February. They anticipate receiving all the necessary materials and equipment to start construction next week, so the end of March. With that, all that equipment received, they plan to start construction the first week of April, so that's weather dependent. The construction timeline is about 25 days, so we anticipate construction being complete at the end of April. I don't have much other update than that, so I'm happy to answer any questions. And if there's no questions, then we would need a 4/5 recommendation to continue the emergency action.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, we'll have the public hearing or public comment on the item. Is there anyone that has expressed interest in commenting on this
I
item?
haven't received any online comments or doesn't seem in person either.
All right, seeing none in person, we'll go to any questions or comments from the board. And I guess we'll go. All right, we'll start with Vice President, we'll come the same way.
I just have a question, are there any planned outages while you have the work being conducted?
We will have a planned outage, a couple of them actually, and during those outages, we will be doing them at night. So that's usually the time of lowest flows, and we will be trying to minimize the impact to the system, and we will be at the same time keeping a close eye on all the system to make sure that outage doesn't impact anybody.
Trustee Matulik.
And at the last meeting, we approved an amount that, to go towards this. And could you give us an idea of how much we spent up to this point of that additional amount, if any?
At this point, we really haven't spent anything.
Okay.
I guess on that, for that specific contract, I'm not sure if we've spent anything outside of that, but on that contract, we haven't spent anything. So construction hasn't started yet. So once that construction starts, I think first week of April, that's when we'll start spending the money.
Okay. And did this incident impact our insurance for the repair of this?
It did, so we are making an insurance claim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Other questions from the board?
All right, so just real quick, so what's our deductible per incident?
This one,
I believe our deductible is 25,000.
right, so it's low on this one, 25,000.
25,000.
And what's our annual cost for insurance?
A lot. I don't have the number off the top of my head, I can get it.
We can provide it.
To be honest, I was just curious.
It's
Because
probably in
insurance
the
has gone
$400,000
up
to
so much.
$600,000 range for all our insurance.
Yeah,
It's in that range.
a lot of them are combined together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You answered the right question. That's good job.
Teamwork. Teamwork, council member.
Wi-Fi. Me too.
I'm seeing, I think we're okay over here. So with that, we are looking for a 4/5 vote to approve the extension. Are we ready for a motion?
I move that we approve the extension of the Emergency Act for Sears Point Sewer Force main repairs due to fire damage.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Wonderful. Unanimous, so it's by 4/5. That is going to bring us to, depending on which agenda you have, either item 6 or 7, which is our general manager's report, and I'll invite General Manager Tomko to
Thank you.
provide any report.
I appreciate it. A quick report, a couple pages. So Jason Kaduk, he was our information specialist. You may have met him. He was pretty extraordinary. He retired from the district after 18 and a half years of dedicated service. He was very passionate about his work. I mean, he's one of the most passionate guys I knew. And we wish him all the best in his retirement and thank him for his years of service. As part of the organizational assessment and to best meet the needs and mission of the district, the Business Services Department will be established March 24th, next Monday. This department will include finance, procurement, information technology, internal and external communications, and administration. Jeff Tucker, the current finance director, will be the new department director for the Business Services Department. This does not add a director, but replaces the Director of Finance position with the Director of Business Services. You will see a new and updated job descriptions in April for the Director of Business Services, the Finance Manager Treasurer, and an IT Manager. Part of what we've looked at, and I'll get into it in the organizational assessment, was looking at our IT structure. That was one of the needs that we looked at. And more detail will be provided in the next meeting. The encampment, President Swartz and I went out there, is growing on Midway Street out there. We're certainly looking for some solutions. We've had our locks cut. It's just being an essential and critical facility has us of great concern of having a huge encampment there. Just having them close to our facility. Because based on the fire that we had at Sears Point, there's trees near there and other things. We just are very concerned about it and hoping that you can help us out and make something happen there. We appreciate it. The district arranged a meeting with lobbyists from the district, City of Vallejo, and Mare Island Company yesterday to pursue and obtain federal funding for Mare Island as a ship charter. In February, Jeff and I met with Congressman Garamendi, and he expressed an interest in bringing more ships and Navy ships to Mare Island. He's also helped sponsor the Ships for America Act. Also, President Trump has expressed a desire to build more ships, as a shipman or something. The value of the district is funding for sewer infrastructure. I mean, we're more looking at it as a way to, hey, can we tag on infrastructure to make this work? Trustee Palmaris was in attendance, so thank you. We appreciate you coming to that. thank you for meeting here at the district. We greatly appreciate it. We enjoy it quite a bit. If there's any preferences you have, anything that we can make better, please let us know. I'm still working on your business cards. I apologize for the delay in getting those out and badges. We're making some changes and we will have them at the next meeting or sooner. And then if you have not turned in your W-4 or had your district email account set up, if you can stick around and we can get those set up, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're gonna come to trustee reports next. That's gonna bring us to our community forum.
I was gonna comment on the different portion.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So I got a chance to meet with our director, and he did share the concerns about the homeless encampment. So I went in there. It is horrible, just saying. But what was concerning is that it does go along this whole entire plant, right? And then I went all the way to the back. There's more property there, and he says that they're having so much problems with them breaking into the storage units there. This business right here shared the same concern. So I did take a bunch of pictures and I sent it, and then the security guard pulled up and he did confirm that there's a lot of damage, and even found people on the property along this side of the fence, right? So we definitely want to see what we can do, because as was mentioned, it is a security issue. One clip of the wire, the whole system is done, as it was expressed to me. And so the security guard said, yes, it's a big problem. And so we definitely want to address that. And I was excited to hear about the ship yard being considered and putting Vallejo back on the map at a higher level. That's exciting, moving Vallejo to a higher level for me. So thank you for sharing. Thank you.
All right, do we have any members of the public that wish to share during the community forum? Anyone online that came in?
No, that I've been aware,
Alright.
President.
All right, that's gonna bring us to our reports by presiding officer and trustees. We've already kind of transitioned into that. Anyone else have anything to report? Yeah, I'll just make a quick note to echo the appreciation for the work that was done to get us meeting here. I think it's helpful for us all to be here and have the different scenery, and we appreciate all the work that staff put into changing that location.
Oh, one thing, I apologize.
Sure, go ahead.
So I want to thank you too for listening, understanding so we can transit our hats, knowing where we're at. So I thank you for listening about the name badge, and also creating a different email for us as well. That's really helpful. And then also the business card and our tag. You see, I left mine in the car.
Sorry.
Gerald, I didn't. Stephen, thank you very much for letting me share those concerns.
Anything else?
Just in regards to the homeless encampment, and have we involved the county with their HOPE team in order to go out there, and then and I know that, well, our city council will be having an emergency meeting tonight in regards to the housing here in Vallejo, but just wanting to put out there, has this district or our board is interested in creating a task force in regarding to the encampment to include the county, so that way there could be some law enforcement, the HOPE team, in order to clear some of that out in partnership with the CBOs. It's not for a conversation now. I know y'all have the emergency meeting, or excuse me, your council will have the emergency meeting, but I just want to uplift this for us to have a conversation about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, and it's 100% related, and I want to thank the general manager. We walked out there just right before this meeting, and the timing of when the encampment grew coincided with the timing that the city was doing the sweeps of River Park and Lemon and these other RV spots, and sure enough, it's the same folks. So we have got to come up with a better solution than when you displace to somewhere else in the city. And I appreciate the offer of partnership with the county, because we've got to think differently about this so that we can keep spaces like this safe and avoid this just transient moving of entire populations of folks around the city.
And we noticed that it is staying within District 6. We noticed that, it's like they feel like it's not being paid attention, so it feels like it's in this area. Because with this whole entire encampment, yes, took pictures of their vehicles on Lincoln, and same vehicles are in, mobile homes are over here now.
And it's River Park.
Yeah,
too,
and
the
also
gentleman
on
who
Fit
went
as
to
well,
River Park,
on Fit
yeah.
as well.
But, so that's something for us to speak about tonight.
That's right.
All right, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn, and the time is 6:43. We have just enough time to jet over. Thank you.
Maybe we can do the